Hi everyone and welcome to a video to explain this new tool. The first tool that I'm going to show, it's the custom material all-in-one for Unreal Engine 5.6 and above 5.7, the version that I am here right now. So when you're gonna open the level, because there's an Unreal Engine level, you can directly take the material. If you need only the project, you can drag and drop that folder material and put it into your level, and you can use it because there's other material to get the preset and everything, and the material can be found here into main. You've got the main material with all the secret inside. If I'm doing this, I'm gonna hide the rest. It's not that difficult to modify if you need, but you can then just right click, create material instance, and you're gonna get all the presets you need here. So I've got the material for the transparency and for the opaque, because transparency works in a different way than the opaque version. It got the same parameters, practically the same, there's some change, but it's two separate material. And for this one, it's just a material blend. If I'm going to layer material, you can see I've got my layers and can add as many layers as I need with a custom blend asset, a material blend here for the vertex color, for the texture, and for the surface imperfection. But let's start with the classic one, the opaque one. So I've created a material instance. Let's drag and drop this here. So by default, I got some textures. I just took some texture from Quixel. It's working, this material is working with Quixel material, so it can work with already texture. If I'm going inside this material, let's talk a little bit about each parameters. Here we go. So first of all, the albedo. So obviously you can change everything you want from the albedo, the brightness, the contrast, the saturation, the tint. If you want a reddish tint, you can have it. Or if you want only a color, you can switch to color, and here you can change the color you want for your texture. So you don't always need a texture if you want. Hop. Now let's go to the variation. We can create some variation of albedo with a noise to get some realism, I can say. So you can take as many noise as you want. For me, I just add a blurry node that you can find here in texture. I think it's in function. I got base per default the lowest blurred noise here. You can add as many noise as you want. You can tweak that noise, that contrast, the noise min and max. So the min and the max of the noise, the brightness of the variation. You can create a variation of tint. And obviously you got the UV tiling and offset and rotation for only the variation. Something you want something smaller, if you want a little bit of rotation, a variation, and everything, you can tweak that here. So if you activate the occlusion ambient, you can add the texture from the OAD. You can use the occlusion ambient for the OAD and tweak the brightness and the contrast like an albedo. As simple as that. You can create variation for the albedo, but you can also add some dirt. From activating this, by default it's in black, but if you're going into texture, you can, for example, take the dust wipes just for testing it, and you can see we got some dirt. It's working like a noise, so you can change the contrast, the brightness, the dirt min and max. Obviously, because it's a new texture, you can change the tile, the offset, but because if you're working with a tile texture, because this tool is working also with tile texture, you can work with and without tile texture. You can also have some randomness. Per default, there are some randomness for the tile, for the dirt, but you can still tweak them to get the look that you want, and that's very useful. For the displacement map, this tool is working with the displacement map of Nanite. So if you're going here into the general, you can go into displacement and enable tessellation. By default, it's enabled for this object and for this material. And then you can change the magnitude, the center of your displacement, but you can also go in here into displacement and change the displacement brightness and contrast of your object. Very useful. because it can be sometimes a little bit annoying to work with displacement map, especially on video game software like Unreal Engine. Then you can activate emissive. Like I said before, once you activate emissive, you're gonna get an emissive texture here. You can add the texture that you want, and you can tweak the emissive brightness. You can obviously tweak the contrast of your emissive. You can change the saturation of it. You can add a tint to that emission. And if you don't want to use any texture, you can just go to switch to emissive color, and it's gonna do the same thing that for the albedo. You can just choose any texture you want, any color you want. Then the mask. Per default, the blend mode is put to masked. So when I'm activating mask, there's gonna be a new texture called mask here. Per default, it's using the texture of the albedo. You can change that. You can change the brightness of the mask and the contrast, or if you want a value, you can directly switch to a mask value. But if you do that, you need to change the blend mode to something different. So for example, to translucent additive or any other things than masked. Maybe alpha composite. But you can still tweak that here. Metalness, you can add any metal you want. Again, once you activate the metalness, you're gonna have access to the texture. You can change the texture that you want, and you, like the albedo and everything, you can change the brightness, the contrast, or if you want, you can switch to a metallic value if you don't have any texture for that material. Then the normal, classic things, you can change the intensity of the normal. For the roughness, it's working pretty much like the metalness. You can change the brightness of your roughness, you can change the contrast, and you can switch to a rough value. For the specular, like the normal, you only got a specular parameter. 0 means no specular, 1 means full specular, and you can change that. For the specular and everything, you can add a surface imperfection. Let's make per default a base metallic material, and let's enable the surface imperfection. It's working in the same way than the dirt. You got practically the same parameters. That means you can add the texture that you want. And you can add some brightness to your imperfection, some contrast. You can change the min and the max of your texture, of your imperfection. You can change the blend. And you can change obviously the tiling and the offset, and even the variation of your texture. Every time there's a new kind of texture, you can activate, you can change the UV of it separately than the others. And here we go. We can go there. If you're working with tight texture, you can go there, activate this, and here you got your UV parameter, because per default it's working with UDIM. That's why if you're looking at, for example, the texture that is where are my main texture? If I'm going there and there. Okay, they are here. The texture, if you're working with UDIM, you need to activate it. So you are going here and to convert it into virtual texture. Here it's by default, it's in virtual texture. That's why it's working with UDIM. But if you're working with a Quixel material per default, you can go into tight texture, activate it, and you're gonna get parameters for the tight texture. So the classical UV tiling and the UV offset rotation, and again, a UV variation that is working like the others. So this material can work with UDIM or tight texture. It can work with metalness, normal, roughness, specular, any kind of texture you need. And you can add as many surface imperfection, albedo variation, dirt to get some realism, to get some variation on everything. And those parameters, you can find them also here. So if I'm going into the material transparency, you got the albedo the same way than for the opaque one. You got the inclusion ambient, the dirt, you can still add some dirt to that glass. You got the emissive, you can have an emissive glass, that's working You can go there, switch to emissive color. Let's pump the intensity of that emissive to something crazy. And here we go. You got a kind of glass emissive material. Then obviously, because it's a glass material, you got the index of refraction. You got a mask, because it can still work with a mask. In the same way than for the others, when you're creating a mask, you got a new texture that is here, and you can add any texture that you want. And here we go, you got a mask for your glass. I'm putting it here, but honestly, I'm never using it when I'm creating a glass material. But it's working, so you can still use it for creating some abstract material. You got the metalness, obviously. You got the normal in the same way, the roughness in the same way, the specular, the surface imperfection, and again, the UV that are here. For this material, because it's a thin translucent, you can get this parameter here, the surface coverage and the transmission color. So for example, if you're going really in the difference, you're gonna see that it's taking the color that are near the object. You can have a pretty cool look. But if you want, you can make sure that your material is taking the albedo, so the color of my glass. And you can have the color of your glass with the transmission color here, transmittance color. And that's how it's working with the glass material, the thin translucent material. Now let's look at this. So here is just a little test for my layer parameters here. So the material can be found into the folder, is the own folder that is called layer. Inside you got the main layer that is here, so the material attribute layer. You can create a material instance, and you're gonna get this. Inside this, you got two folders, ML and MLB. So ML is for the material layer. So I can again create a layer instance and drag and drop it on my background. And you can drag and drop, for example, your material layer here. And you're gonna get the same parameters that you got per default for this opaque one. But the funny thing is that you can, because it's a layer blend, you can add a blend asset. So if I'm going into MLB, it's a layer blend. You got, like in the same way, the material layer per default. And if you're going there, you got the instance one. And you can drag and drop that here. And here you're gonna get some parameters. So the parameters are this. If I'm going there, here's the parameter that you got. You can use some surface imperfection. So here it's just gonna ask you a texture, any texture you want. And you can mask with the surface imperfection. You can see there that you got now a mask. Or if you want, you can use the vertex color and you can paint with the vertex color. You can paint with the blue, the red and the green. And you can see here, for each layer, I've choose a different color, except for the last one because I don't need it. But you can create multiple, you can add multiple layers and blend them with a vertex color by checking those boxes here. That's gonna switch because they're gonna switch between red, green and blue for the vertex color. So those materials are working in the same way than for the layer set and everything, so with parameters and everything, and you just need to drop that material layer blend instance, and here you can tweak the surface imperfection, the texture and the vertex color. And that's all you need to create any material you need. Obviously, if you need some really precise artistic material, you can still tweak inside the material and how it's working. Everything is pretty organized, so it's easy to modify the material if you need. I'm gonna create, I've got other materials. The next material that I'm gonna show you is working pretty much in the same way than the material layer blend, but it's for environment and it's for example, landscape. It's gonna be a landscape custom material, and it got some really precise and cool UV work on it, so that you can scale your UV based on the distance from the camera. It's something that is pretty cool and pretty useful when you're working with environment, and it's gonna be the next asset that I'm gonna show and show you. Hope you liked it. If you got any question, you can ask it. And see you later.